Good evening, friends. So today is our lecture number 3 of psychology. In previous lectures we understood what psychology is studying, how it is supposed to be scientific, from where it emerged, and how the discipline of psychology, because of its ontology, epistemology and methodology. Ontology, what it sets to examine; epistemology, how valid are its principles; and methodology, which it uses to study its subject. And what are the subjects of psychology? The subjects of psychology, as we have understood, are human behavior, and cognitive processes. Human behavior and cognitive processes. These two are the subjects of psychology. And how does psychology study them? What is the method employed? The method employed, we have seen, is the scientific, as psychology is defined as scientific study of human behavior and cognitive processes. One-liner definition which you have to remember. And please remember, this is the definition which you have to repeat anywhere, everywhere. You don't need to remember 5 different definitions of psychology, because you are not supposed to be an expert of psychology who knows unnecessary details of psychology. You are an expert of psychology who understands the concepts and threads of psychology and applies it in the most diverse manner. This is what we are training here. This is what our approach should be as a civil service aspirant. And for those people who are choosing to teach psychology, also the same method: conceptual understanding and application. Because you see, most of the time in your study of psychology for your exams, you need to focus on application. If you are reading psychology, studying psychology for your personal growth, there also you need to apply the principles of psychology in your environment. For that also you need to understand the applied consequences of the psychological principles. So our focus will be on applied principles. So scientific study of human behavior and cognitive processes, psychology defined. Definition: human behavior and cognitive process, HB and CP. Human behavior, cognitive process. When we say human behavior, it is overt, observable. Like if you are learning to drive, then we can measure that earlier you did not know, rather than pressing the accelerator you are pressing the brake, or rather than pressing the brake you are pressing accelerator. In place of first gear you are applying fourth gear. So these things, there is an improvement. So we can say there is a learning has taken place, observable, measurable. Cognitive processes: thinking, the way you think. Although most of the covert processes earlier we could not measure, but with the incidence, with the emergence of computers and its use in psychology, now we can understand the covert processes as well. So this also becomes our object of study: human behavior and cognitive processes both. We understood and discussed the nature of psychology, which is supposed to be scientific, threadbare, thoroughly. Scientific nature was explored thoroughly. But we reached to 4 principles which defines whether a discipline is scientific or not. These four principles, as we have discussed earlier, whether it is your objective study or not. Objectivity, that is, it is free from biases, and we have seen the human biases in form of two aspects, especially the experimenter bias EB and demand characteristics. Experimenter bias, the experimenter himself or herself being biased that his or her hypothesis should be correct. That is why consciously or subconsciously giving suggestion to the experimental group. Experimental group is the group where the treatment is provided or manipulation of independent variable is provided. The experimenter knows this is the experimental group. So, to the experimental group, consciously or subconsciously, the experimenter will suggest, okay, you should behave in this manner. You should reflect that our special skill education which we are providing to you has resulted in a betterment of your performance. And demand characteristics, the experimental group, if the subjects in the group know that they belong to the experimental group, they start behaving in certain manner. Demand characteristics, that is why what is done, single blind and double blind. In double blind, neither the experimenter nor the subjects know to which group they belong, experimental or control group. In single blind, the subjects don't know, but the experimenter knows. In which group these subjects belong. So, through this we ensure that there is objectivity. Then comes skepticism. Skepticism, as we have discussed, skepticism is, we are not saying that our hypothesis is correct. We are going by taking null hypothesis, that treatment resulted into no improvement. Experimental group is equal to control group. No improvement. This is our null hypothesis, and this we have to prove incorrect. Once the null hypothesis is proven incorrect, then only the hypothesis is supposed to be correct. So we are going in a reverse manner, not saying that our hypothesis is correct, but saying that the null hypothesis is incorrect. This is skepticism, which every scientific discipline follows. Then we have our accuracy. We have already told objectivity, accuracy in data collection. And what are the methods of data collection in psychology? Observation, observing it. Case study, interview, questionnaire, observing the things. In Nuh, Haryana, Nuh, communal violence took place. Communal violence, CV. So, the researcher goes and does a descriptive study. Descriptive study. What is descriptive study? descriptive study where, see, IV has already taken place, the manipulation has already taken place. IV, that is riot, has already taken place. We have no control over that. We are not manipulating the external variable, any other variable which affects the behavior of the people where violence took place, that also we are not taking into account. We are not taking into account anything. So IV manipulation not possible. EV we are not controlling, not controlling. So what we are doing then? We are just observing, doing a descriptive study here, descriptive study. And these descriptive studies are NER, non-experimental research. Why it is non-experimental research? We have seen in the last class. Everything told to you crisply. And even if you remember these points, that is enough to answer the questions which appear in the exams 2013 onwards. No need to go into study complete everything, Gita, Quran, Bible, all you studied, but you don't know what is dharma. There is no dharma. There is no dharma production. Karan Johar movie. If you do your karma well, dharma will also follow you. So, going to this karma dharma approach, what we see is that descriptive studies NER, non-experimental research. NER is where IV manipulation also not possible. EV control is also not desirable. And then you are measuring DV also not very objectively, effectively, but subjectively. Observing it. NER, non-experimental research. Then comes your quasi-experimental research, QER. What happens here is, randomization is not possible. Random assignment to experimental group and control group, that is not possible. Which effectively means that if there are 1,000 people, if there are 1,000 people in a village where the riots took place, and we are supposed to split it into two halves, control group and experimental group. In the experimental group 500 people, in the control group 500 people, but keeping everything constant, that is race, gender, caste, creed, everything constant. Randomly dividing it into two groups, as simple as that. But in this case, quasi-experimental research, the randomization does not take place. We are deliberately keeping certain people here, not doing randomization. So because of that, what is actually happening? Because randomization has not been done, the EV control is not there. EV is not being controlled. But what is possible? What is possible is IV is being manipulated. IV manipulation is being done. How? Suppose in the Nuhu experiment itself, Nuhu village where riots took place, we are dividing the whole affected lot into two groups, but we are deliberately keeping women in one group and men in other group. So we are not randomizing things, women here, men there, or people from particular religion in our control group and another religion in experimental group. So randomization is not there, but still we can see the effect of the incidence of violence which they saw in them by measuring their stress, anxiety. By measuring their anxiety level, we can see, or we can manipulate. How? By showing them the pictures. Experimental group, control group, they are shown the pictures of violence, and then we'll measure their anxiety level. Control group, no manipulation, we'll see their anxiety level. Manipulation of IV is taking place, that is happening, treatment is being done, and treatment is nothing but manipulation of IV. This is the manipulation of IV, nothing else. So in the experimental group we will see the base level anxiety, and in the control group what is the base level of anxiety, but we are not doing the randomization. So this is called QER, quasi experimental research. Finish. In the pure experimental research, what we are supposed to have is IV manipulation, EV control, and DV measurement. All done effectively, efficiently and effectively. Or if you want to add economically, efficiently, effectively. Finished. If you are doing this, then the experiment is pure. That is experimental design. So what happens in psychology is most of the experiments are NER and QER, non-experimental research and quasi-experimental research. And we have seen the reasons, various reasons. The subject matter itself is indirect. We cannot observe it directly. There are ethical constraints. There are covert processes. So because of that, we cannot go for experimental design always. Finish. Even here your 10 marker, 15 marker, done. Let's now go to your principles of objectivity, as we were, how to call a discipline science. So accuracy in the data collection we were talking about. Objectivity, skepticism already dealt. Accuracy, the data collector, the person who collects the data should be accurate. If we are supposed to choose the base level anxiety of every third household, starting from the main Agrawal Sweets Columbar of old Rajendra Nagar, then it should be third house, not the fourth house. Otherwise the data collected will be misleading in its nature, and the whole hypothesis will suffer. The experiment will go haywire. So objectivity, skepticism, and then accuracy. After that, this is you, not we. The universality of the principles. The principles which are there in the discipline should be universal in its approach. They should be applied universally to all situations. As we have seen, the discipline of psychology and most of the disciplines have suffered from this positivism. Earlier the positivism was there, and inductive approach was there, which meant that there should be universal principles which should be applied to each and every situation, which does not happen. So from positivism we went to logical positivism, that is, the principles can be changed according to the situation of the case. Then deductive approach, collecting the data, from there reaching to the theorization. Within these boundaries only, I am saying that the principle should be universal. Not having principles like natural sciences where G is, or F, force is equal to mass into acceleration, that kind of theorization is not possible in psychology. So we have learnt all these things. We have also understood that not only the principles universality is important, but the scales used in psychology are not scales. Ratio scales. These are not ratio scales. We cannot compare two individuals and say that the IQ of 140 is twice that of a person whose IQ is 70. No, these two are not comparable at all. Unlike in natural sciences, when we say the person of 80 kg weight is twice the weight of 40 kg weight person. Likewise, we cannot say it here. So, what is used here is your ranking scale, ordinal, order based scale, make a ranking, or your interval scales generally used. Intervals are provided, IQ from 110 to 120, kind of ordinal giving an order, IQ 140, 130, 120, 110 likewise with a space of 10, that is provided. Ordinal, interval, these are the two scales used. Then we have also understood that there is no absolute zero here, which is the case with natural sciences. Absolute zero is missing. There is no zero here, nobody is zero here. As Howard Gardner in his approach, if you understand the context, Howard Gardner says that everybody is intelligent. Why are you saying that the people who have high IQ, they alone are intelligent? And it had huge implications in educational psychology, in mental health. There are no retarded people. They are spatially abled people. So there is no absolute zero. Nobody is zero here. Multiple intelligence. Intelligence has different constructs. Somebody may be musically intelligent, but as far as IQ is concerned, their IQ is very low. But their musical intelligence is of exceptional level, for which we have examples like idiot savants, Williams syndrome. People with exceptional musical intelligence but with very less IQ level. So there is no absolute zero here. The implication of not having absolute zero, not having ratio scales. Comparable, relative. This much we have understood. Now we will go and understand how, from where the psychology emerged. And within these threads only we will realize that psychology went from, first of all, how psychology emerged. Let us discuss the emergence of psychology. Who are the father and mother of psychology? Not Sigmund Freud or Wilhelm Wundt. The disciplines which gave birth to psychology, first and foremost, the discipline which gave birth to most of the other disciplines, philosophy. Philosophy. Since ages, the main concern of most of the experts has been what is behind the mind. How can we study mind? Because mind has been the most complex of all the constructs. Mind, what is mind? What is mind? What are its constituents? How it behaves? That has been the main concern of study for most of the experts. So, under the garb of philosophy, mind and the questions of mind, especially the two important aspects, one, whether it is free will or environmental determinism. This is one thing. While studying the mind only, the two major things which were studied were free will versus environmental determinism, one. Second, mind body relationship. First is your free will or determinism. These are two major debates which has shaped most of the disciplines, especially psychology. The major ideas around which psychology revolves. We also will see why it is important to understand these threads, because then you will have a grasp and you will have a not only the understanding, you will be passionate about learning psychology. That will reflect in your answers, which examiner likes and gives you marks. They study free will. What is free will? मेरी मर्जी approach. Free will is मेरी मर्जी approach. That was followed by humanistic perspective in psychology. We'll deal with that later on, but let's understand what does free will mean. The humanistic perspective propounders, especially, who are the two people whom you should remember? Maslow and Rogers. Maslow and Rogers, these are the people, main propounders of humanistic perspective. What they say? Free will. We are born with innate, predefined, pre-given tendencies to achieve the highest potentials of ourselves, and we are not driven by environment in any case, any sense. This is what free will says. In that we'll see, what they say is we are born to, first of all, we are positive human beings, positive, not driven by negative forces but positivity, growth, happiness, and especially self-actualization. What does self-actualization means? What does self-actualization mean? What is the context of self-actualization? Actualizing your potential, that is, to reach to the highest potentials which you were born with. Not being concerned about your safety, not being concerned about your self-esteem, social esteem, how much izzat you get in society, how much izzat you give to yourself. You are concerned about reaching the peak of your human potentialities, innate potentialities which you are born with. In this context, a famous quote: don't be over concerned about the power, money, authority, prestige, because someday you may meet someone who does not give any respect to any of these, is not bothered about these things. Then you will realize you are a poor person. In this context only it is said, when you are born with actualizing tendencies and you achieve that, you have reached the highest sense of your potentialities, highest self. This is told by Maslow. We are not diverting anywhere. These things are important aspects. We'll deal with it later, but here also, after so many repetition, rectification approach, you will be having all these ammunitions in your bag, in your mind, so that you can apply it anywhere. What does Maslow say? These are your basic need. What are basic needs? जानवरों वाले need. Food, safety, sex. फिजियोलॉजिकल सेफ्टी, रोटी कपड़ा मकान, ये सब मिल गया हमको. देन विल गो टू द एस्टीम नीड्स. हाउ मच इज्जत. दिस इज इज्जत अप्रोच. बेसिक नीड्स फुलफिल्ड. नाउ विल लुक फॉर. अब हमें खाना पीना रोटी कपड़ा मकान इज ऑल देयर विद अस. व्हाट वी शुड डू. नाउ वी नीड रेस्पेक्ट, ईगो, social esteem and self esteem. How much respect you get in society, your social esteem, and how much confidence you have in your abilities, self esteem, social esteem, self esteem. When you breach all these things, you reach to your SA, self actualization. Basic needs, esteem needs, actualizing needs. Basic needs, esteem needs. Basic needs B, esteem needs E, and A is actualizing needs. Actualizing needs, you are driven by the fact that you are a human being and you know that you are born to achieve certain peak experiences, and you see those people who have reached this level, they keep on smiling. Suddenly there is burst of peak experiences in their mind, they start laughing. You will say, what is happening? There is nothing funny about the environment, nobody has cracked a joke, why this guy is laughing? These people are reaching to actualizing position. This is told by Maslow. Maslow says that there is a hierarchy. Once the basic needs are fulfilled, then esteem needs are actualized, but that is not true. We'll learn about this later on. That's not true. It may take place. There are people who are hungry but driven by some vision. There are people who don't have 2 square meals, but rather than thinking about that situation, Elon Musk, living in such an abjectly poor and conditions where the environment of his home, the family, that is parents, were always fighting with each other. He was being bullied in the school, but what he used these opportunities for? Self growth. Studied about the rocket, made a rocket. That is also possible. You have to realize that potential within you. Everybody has a hero within. This is the theory of Maslow. Many limitations we'll see later. Then another approach by Carl Rogers. These are the two parts of yourself. This is your ideal self, which you think you are, and this is what you are. Which you think you are and what you are. Example, you go to the gym. The mirrors in the gym are placed in such angles and such distance, and the kind of mirrors which they place, you will always look heavier, stronger. So what is the suggestion in your mind? That I am getting bigger, I am getting stronger. Suggestions. Actually what is happening? The growth may be there, yes, but not at that speed which they are suggesting you to. And if you have this congruence, this is incongruence. Ideal self different, real self, these two are at different sides. Your ideal self, you think that you are a very polite person. I have met, for example, one of the renowned persons in the arena of teaching faculty only. I met recently, just giving you an example without naming anybody. thinks that this person has got highest etiquettes, mannerism, but actual reality is always abusing. In the personal conduct, this guy is always abusing. So there is an incongruence. What will it lead to? Disorders. When you say what you are, when you feel what you are, and you accept yourself as you are, acceptance is the key. Acceptance of what your real self is. There is congruence between real self and ideal self. Complete congruence. That you know what you are. You are not trying to become ideal. Have you seen people? They say that yes, I am offering this course. This is your price. Give it to me. Lawyers with congruence in their approach. Okay, this is what I do. This is the price tag. My time is not free. As simple as that. Real self, ideal self, congruent. They know that these are my innate drives. And they are not ashamed about it. They don't doubt it. They are not guilty about it. Complete congruence. When this happens, you reach your humanistic potentialities. What you are born with, you know what you are, and you project in the environment that I am this. Trying to become something creates problems. So we'll go back to our discussion where it started from. Free will versus environmental determinism. Under the free will, the most constructive and one of the most forceful perspectives in psychology has been of humanistic perspective. Then comes your environmental determinism. What comes under environmental determinism? Your behavior is being determined by environment. And what does environment mean here? Environmental determinism what does it mean? Two types of environment. It is not only the environment outside but the environment inside that also works. Not the environment outside, what is happening around in the class. You are attending the class, surroundings, so many people, who is doing what, who is eating chocolate in the class, who is watching some other videos in the class. That also defines you, that also determines your behavior. You get distracted. But what is running inside your brain, inside your mind, what you visualize, this is called fixation. Your mind not only fixated to what you saw on Netflix last night, your that Inception movie, Inception, dream under dream under dream. You watched that movie yesterday. Yesterday you watched that movie. What is happening in the dream? You could not realize that how can there be 3-4 layers of the dream that is running in your mind. So your internal environment and your external environment, both are defining your behavior. That is called environmental determinism. External environment completely determining your behavior was given by whom? External environment. Determining your behavior completely one to one. External environment, stimulus, this is behavior is response. You must have understood by now. Stimulus response approach. Stimulus defining your response. Stimulus defining your behavior. No role of your internal mechanism. External environment only. We are not talking about internal environment. External environment defining your You completely, one by one. Mirror image, that is called mirroring of stimulus or external environment by behavior. Mirroring, complete mirroring, one by one, one to one, stimulus response. The approach is also known as radical behaviorism. Radical. They say only environment determines your behavior, that's it. And these behaviorists say, as we will see later on when we study the perspectives in detail, behaviorists say that we should not study these internal processes, covert processes, because they are not observable, they are not measurable. Since they are not observable, they are not measurable. We should not study them. Why to waste time? Study only things which are observed. Study things which can be observed. Study things which can be measured. Otherwise, just leave it. So, radical behaviorism says that your behavior is determined completely by the environment. This approach is also known as neuropsychological. Neuropsychology is not something else. This is the neuropsychological approach. Neuropsychology. How? Two forces, especially CC, classical conditioning, OC, operant conditioning. Classical conditioning, first we will see, this is classical conditioning. And why this name conditioning? This name conditioning comes from the fact that your behavior is conditioned by the environment. Behavior getting conditioned by environment means it is conditioning. Classical, because there the role of the subject, the organism is zero, not minimal, zero, passive. How? Pavlov's dog. Pavlov did an experiment. We will see all these in learning chapter also, but giving you briefly. Pavlov did an experiment. What he did, there is a, here it is a dog who is put inside a box, chained. The meat powder or meat in raw form is brought near to the dog's box. The dog starts salivating. Being hungry, the dog starts salivation. Now this stimulus here is, we have not provided any conditioning here. So this is unconditioned stimulus. Stimulus, something which is there in the environment, this is unconditioned. We have not done any tampering with the stimulus. Unconditioned stimulus. This is unconditioned response. US. Unconditioned response. Unconditioned stimulus gives unconditioned response. Salivation. Salivation is the response. The dog salivates. Anybody who is hungry and the favorite food comes will salivate. As simple, biological. What happened? After seeing the meat, inside the brain of dog runs a loop, neurological loop. Neurological loop running inside the dog's brain. Now, before bringing meat here, which is your unconditioned stimulus, a conditioned stimulus was brought. That is, a bell was rung. Bell. Bell is your conditioned stimulus. Bell was rung first, then meat was brought. And dog is here. After the bell was rung, before meat being presented, so many times, repeated. And as soon as the bell was rung, meat was brought to the dog, in front of the dog. The dog starts salivating when only the bell is rung. Only the bell is rung, that is conditioned stimulus. Only conditioned stimulus. No, we are pairing CS-US. Unconditioned and conditioned stimulus are paired. Unconditioned stimulus is something which we have not tempered, which we have not changed, and that is your meat powder. Conditioned stimulus is ringing of bell. These two are paired. Ringing of bell takes place. After that, the meat is presented. The dog still salivates. The dog is giving the same response which was there for unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response. We can say it is unconditioned or conditioned response, the intensity being same according to the radical behaviors. Just because the CS and US, conditioned stimulus and unconditioned stimulus, are paired regularly for a large number of trial, there is the presence of the same response which would have happened with the presence of meat alone. What happened here? The traces in the brain of the dog, same biological traces which was there for meat alone, same traces in the brain if bell alone is there. Only bell is rung, immediately after ringing of the bell, the traces like this start running in the brain of the dog. This is nothing but neurological. Approach. That is why it is also called neurological or neuropsychological approach. Neuropsychology defines the learning, defines the behavior. This is also called radical behaviorism because it's saying that the dog's role is minimal. Dog is playing passive role. Dog has nothing to do. Many people in current scenario, in recent scenario, have become the same. Pavlov's dog like. Have you seen a crowd following a fanatic leader? Fanatic. Fanatic leader, somebody who gives you a religious fundamentalism, gives the slogan, certain slogans. Fanatic leader will chant some words. Leader says something. साइकोलॉजी की जय हो। Everybody in the crowd will chant the same thing, like the Pavlov's dog, without applying the mind. Radical behaviorism, not applying anything, playing a passive role. In place of this, there is another approach which is called operant conditioning. Where classic experiment given by Skinner, what does Skinner say? That rat entered a maze. Their lever was there. Rat was supposed to press it to an defined number of times, 10 times. Then food pellet dropped. Pellet of food dropped. After so many trials, rat learned that the rat has to press the lever this number of times, then food pellet will drop. This is called operant conditioning. Operant conditioning, where the role of the organism, role of the subject, role of the learner or the person or the animal who is showing the behavior is not passive, it is active. Depending upon the, because if the Skinner's rat does not press the lever, there won't be any food pellet. Although the rat might be driven by the hunger, but rat has to do some activity. But still, because the reinforcement, that is, what is the outcome of the response? Outcome of response is called reinforcement. This will define your behavior. If the food pellet does not come, the rat will leave. Rat has understood, but that pressing the lever so many times will result into food pellets, and that's why rat is doing it. The outcome of response, the reinforcement which you get, you are teaching your child to behave in a proper manner. The reinforcement which you bring, positive reinforcement, positive, that is reward, you will get a bicycle. The smaller kid, of course, the smart bicycle of which nowadays are there on the road, these bicycles, you will get these kind of bicycles which will have gear, which will have all the inclination in their gears. There will be music, there will be smartwatch in the bike itself. Why? You say to the child that if you get up early morning and after that you go for running or you go for the exercise or yoga, the child repeats this activity for 1 month and you give the reward. This activity gets strengthened, this habit gets strengthened. So the outcome of the response, this is the response, this is the outcome. Because of the outcome of response, further the child says, no, okay, I am now doing this so many exercises, not only the physical exercise, the mental exercise also, puzzles, quizzes, studying in the early hours of the morning for the test, give me something more. So the behavior is shaped by the response outcome. Here the child is playing an active role, not passive like Pavlov's dog, or Skinner's rat is not playing passive role but an active role. So we'll learn it later on. First of all, we will go to our original debates. Free will versus environmental determinism. This was first debate. Second debate was mind versus body. What is the connection between body and mind? That we will see under two different approaches. This we have seen largely. Mind body relation. This was one of the major forces which defined the discipline of psychology. And before we go deep into that, as we have said, determinism involves environmental determinism, and within environmental determinism, the external environmental determinism I have told you through classical conditioning, operant conditioning, that is the behaviorism approach. What about the internal environment? Briefly about this, because it will be left, so it may create confusion in your mind, as we have understood that there is a gestaltist approach, something which is learned in a complete manner, which you remember better. So external environment we have already talked about. Let's talk about internal environment. When we say internal environment, what does it mean? Now the forces of external environment were shaped by whom? Behaviorism. The forces of internal environment will be shaped by, basically the forces of internal environment will be shaped by two perspectives of psychology, which are known as cognitivist and psychoanalyst. Psychoanalytic and cognitivist. Free will versus determinism. Free will, we have understood, the forces are humanistic perspective that defines free will. Mary Murgy approach. I am born with innate tendencies to achieve the self-actualizing positive nature of human beings. Major heroes, the main heroes being Maslow and Rogers, Carl Rogers and Maslow. Then we went to determinism, environmental determinism. Environmental determinism being defined by two forces or two parts of environmental determinism. One is your external environmental determinism and internal environment. So external environment determinism is defined by behaviorism. There we have two threads. One is your classical conditioning, another one is operant conditioning. Classical conditioning is also called radical behaviorism, because they say that the organism in question, the subject in question, is remaining passive. Whereas operant conditioning says, operant conditioning force or part of behaviorism says that the organism remains active. Done and dusted. Now we come to internal environment. Environmental determinism has two parts, one external, another one internal. And internal environmental determinism can be defined by two major forces, which are psychoanalytic and cognitivist. How? Your internal environment defining your behavior. Psychoanalytic forces given by none other than the Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud was the propounder of this psychoanalytic perspective, said that we are born with the innate tendencies or psychic forces. We also call this psychic determinism. Psychic determinism. Or biological determinism. Psychic or biological determinism. The psychic forces within ourselves, which we are born with. Psychic forces are primarily negative or dark. They say that these psychic energies have the constructs, the constituents of psychic energy are sex and aggression. Sex and aggression, and our behavior is shaped by these psychic forces and to a large extent our early childhood experiences. We are talking about psychoanalytic forces. Early childhood, when we did not get full consciousness of our behavior, when we are very small, infancy, early childhood. When we are talking about early childhood, when we have not recognized our behavior, when we are unaware of our environment, everything is happening subconsciously and unconsciously. At that point of time, early childhood experiences and the psychic forces, that is our innate tendencies, which are built up of sex and aggression, they define our not only the behavior which we are doing right now, but the complete life is defined by these forces. This was the perspective given by Sigmund Freud, psychoanalytic perspective. Biological determinism, psychic determinism, or internal environmental determinism. Where the major aspect of study, why? Because Sigmund Freud has a huge impact as far as the study of personality is concerned. You see, when we talk about psychology, whenever we talk about, जब भी हम psychology की बात करते हैं, you know, what is the major thing, major point of interest? Okay, after studying psychology, we'll get to know what is the personality of the person. इधर हम बैठेंगे कॉफी के टेबल पे, सामने जो भी बैठा हो हम उसकी पर्सनालिटी रीड कर लेंगे. Just in 5 minutes we'll get to know. Okay, the hand gesture is like this, the person is thinking in this manner. Head nods like this, raising the eyebrow again and again. Okay, the person is thinking something else. Twitching of facial skin, person is lying. So these things are determined by what? Sigmund Freud's approach. वैसा ऐसा होता नहीं है. We don't know. There is a scientific approach of assessing anybody's personality. That's why we say when a 15-20 minute of interview of UPSC is held, can they judge the personality of a person? Definitely not. That's why we see the person who was already serving in IPS was caught cheating in the exam when he was writing exam again to improve his rank. Cheating in the exam, despite the fact that he got very good marks in ethics paper. Dismissed from the service. So Sigmund Freud, what he said, what did he study, and what was the major impact during that era? You understand, the story is very important. Lots of cases of mental disorders were taking place. Mental disorder, people were having huge amount of problems, people were suffering. His own daughter also, as some people account, that suffering from mental disorders like hysteria, having bouts and fits of epilepsy suddenly, getting hysteric, mania, doing something again and again, not knowing why I'm doing so. That was an era where people were generally driven by the sermonization of churches. The church, religion, these forces, dark forces, were defining the society. So at that point of time, or as an opposing force to behaviorism, Sigmund Freud emerged as the most significant force which shaped the future of psychology, like anything, especially the study of personality and mental disorders. As he treated Anna O, his patient, by the techniques of psychoanalytic psychotherapy, where free association, freely associate. On the couch you are lying, Sigmund Freud is asking you questions, and you are freely associating things, having full faith in the psychotherapist. You are giving all the details, even the personal details, to the therapist. This is happening to me, I see this shape in the dream, I see this dream again and again, freely associated by the therapist. Dream analysis was done, of course. Free association, dream analysis. Freely associating the facts given by the client. We don't say the patient, the client. Then analyzing the dream. What Sigmund Freud did? Talking cure, which is actually true to a large extent. If somebody is able to write down, jot down, or speak to someone whom he or she has high regard for, each and every details, without being judged, without having the fear of being judged, if a person can say each and everything to the therapist, then lots of issues are resolved. The internal conflicts within mind are resolved. Internal conflicts driven by the psychic forces again. So talking cure, talk and you get cured, because everything which was there, pent up feelings, pent up emotions, are out of your mind now. As some people say, after revealing all the details, after crying a lot, I felt very light. This is the pent up feeling getting released. Catharsis, catharsis, catharsis. Jama hua kooda kabada, which you are releasing. Several ways of that. There is a creative way of releasing this also. Creative way. Creative way of releasing them through literary activity, doing something creative, novel, that also releases this catharsis. So he cured Anna O through talking only. In this era, his approach was revolutionary. He revolutionized our understanding of personality when he said that this part, conscious part, is only a tip of the iceberg. Iceberg, you understand? This all is water. This is all water. This is the ice which you can see. All the amount of ice which is below water you cannot see, cannot observe, cannot feel, don't have any idea about. And this part is made up of what? Unconscious, uncon. This is unconscious part. This part is your unconscious. Uncon part. Or subconscious also, plus subconscious. Subconscious and unconscious, which is not apparent to us. We are unaware about us. This all unconscious and subconscious aspects of our personality. And that is why Titanic crashes. The Titanic saw only conscious, but we don't know. We are unaware about our own feeling. You see, you can relate to it. Sometimes we say, I don't have anything to do with this person. Wherever he or she is supposed to go, go. When this person starts going away, your heart is pounding, because the feelings which are there in the subconscious and unconscious mind, that takes over your conscious feelings. And we are not rational human beings. The thing is that every human being, as I already told you, is having this bounded rationality. We cannot be completely rational. We are not robots. So we cannot communicate each and every of our feeling every time. There are certain feelings which we have to bury. That is why Sigmund Freud's approach of dividing the personality into three parts, id, ego, or rather we should not draw this diagram, id, ego, superego. Id, the forces of psychic forces, sex and aggression, which always tells you do this to satiate your feelings, so that you get satiated as far as your feelings of sex and aggression is concerned. Your basic needs are fulfilled. Always thinking of immediate gratification, not delayed gratification, immediate gratification. Then comes your ego part, which says that how much exposure you have to the reality of the environment. Reality. And superego, your morals, which are defined by the society. There's a constant fight between the id forces. Sigmund Freud's thinking was that we are like animals. Animals always want food, sex, rest, always physical safety, physical satisfaction. So he thought that id defines all of our activities, but then there is a exposure to reality, something which can be done or cannot be done. also defined by the morals in the society you are living, in that society, whether it is possible, whether it is feasible, whether it is applicable or not. So the id gets exposed to the realities. Id is defining us for sure, but id has to fight with the ego, the reality of the environment, and the values, that is superego. These two forces are at fight with id, according to Sigmund Freud. This is our internal environment. This is our personality, given by psychoanalytic perspective. The champion being Sigmund Freud. Then comes within the internal environment itself. And one of the most important perspectives as far as contemporary psychology is concerned, cognitive. Cognitivist, cognitive perspective, internal environment. That says that, yeah, see, what cognitivists say? Cognitive people say the Skinner's rat is here, fine. Skinner is here. Skinner left the rat into the maze. Rat reached to the maze, reached to the lever, pressed the lever, and food pellet came. Okay, for the first time we can understand that the rat pressed the lever out of curiosity, suppose, or it is the behavior of animal to explore the environment. The food pellet came. But what about the second time? Why did the rat go there? The rat was driven by hunger, sensation of hunger. Which is within the rat. Rat's mental construct is defined by sensation of hunger or not? Mental construct of rat is defined by sensation of hunger, which is their internal environment. Not being defined completely externally, that food is there as a reinforcement. The rat is being defined by hunger sensation. If the rat was not hungry, if the rat were not hungry, the rat won't go there. Suppose the rat is not feeling hungry. Within the trial only, between the trial, rat got cheese from some other place. The rat is not hungry. Rat will not go and press the lever. As simple as that. As some people say, there is no point preparing for civil services when I have got a satisfying job which appeals to their mental makeup, and that's why they are not going to fight for a risky examination. That is their approach. So what is happening there? Although we have so much of, you see, the approach of Herzberg. Herzberg was a person who defined motivation. There are two sets of factor, hygiene factor and then there are motivators. He said the hygiene factors are that because of which you like the job, that is, you are doing a job of IAS. What are the hygiene factors? The respect you get, the salary you get, the perks you get, esteem you receive. But what is the motivator? The motivator is you like the job because it gives you a challenging duty. It gives you internal satisfaction. This is motivator. These are hygiene factors. So if we go by this cognitive approach, then these factors should dominate more than the hygiene factors, more than the environmental factor, or if we look at in another perspective, the extrinsic motivators and intrinsic motivation. We have seen extrinsic motivation, what is there in the environment which the reward you get, that alone will not let you go far. As I told you, for example, you are choosing an option. The optional you are choosing because this optional is very scoring. Okay, this is scoring optional. Syllabus is also very less. But after studying it for maybe 1 or 2 attempts, you see that I did not like this optional. Let us choose something which I like. Same holds true for relationship also. You choose a person where you find the rewards very high, as happens in the case of arranged marriages. You find the rewards very high, lots of dowry, getting married into an influential family. These are extrinsic motivation, but internal motivation is whether you have a chemistry with the person or not. Likewise, you have a chemistry with the optional or not. Likewise, whether you like the job of IAS internally, that is intrinsic motivators are there or not. Otherwise, you won't go far. After some time, you will be bored and nothing will inspire you. Rather, if you are a qualified person, if you have some plan B, you may leave the job and go and shift to that job. Many people have left IAS and they have joined job of a bank PO. I know many people, bank PO job, lesser salary, everything, but they are satisfied here. They like this job. Left the job, lots of challenges, left it because they are not intrinsically motivated. So intrinsic motivation is a construct of your internal environment given by cognitive thinkers, and because of this cognitivist only, so many constructs which were left by your behaviorist, like intelligence, thinking, problem solving, they all become a matter of study. Otherwise, it would have been left. What happened, what helped cognitivists also is the revolution of ICT, information and communication technology, that is computers. Which gave us, computer technology gave us the liberty to study things in a simulated manner, simulation studies. We can now replicate, duplicate the behavior of a sports person, which he will do in the ground. We can see that behavior on our computer screen by feeding the data of person's age, physical status, past achievements, the playing style, everything fed, and then the player's complete response will come here. Player will be shown playing. The kind of shots which backhand which Sania Mirza will be using in the match will be displayed on the TV screen, on your laptop screen, on your MacBook itself. Then you will realize that now the internal process of the sportsman is also there. As I had told you, there is Yerkes-Dodson approach. This is your arousal and this is the performance. So optimal arousal leading to better performance. This is optimal arousal. And the performance being best here. This can be judged by simulation study itself. This graph is called what? Yerkes-Dodson. The simulation study done on computers. Because of the incidence of computer technologies, especially the things like psycho-cybernetics, cognitivists got a huge leap in their studies. So nowadays, the current psychological perspectives, the contemporary psychology is apart from other perspective, one major perspective which is dominating the current perspective of psychology is cognitivist, cognitive psychology, cognitivist or cognitive psychology. You can name it either way. Cognitive psychology, developmental psychology, cross-cultural, socio-cultural, biological, evolutionary. Psycho-cybernetics, neuropsychological approach has already been thrown into dust, the biological approach. Deterministic approach also not very apparent now. These approaches are, as we will see later on, these approaches are dominating the themes of psychology. Now we'll come to the evolution, how it happened, what happened. As I told you, the major study point for any discipline has been the study of mind. So the study of mind was the approach. Earlier, the study of mind was being done by philosophers. Philosophy. But philosophy was reading or studying mind or studying the perspectives of mind, especially free will versus determinism and mind body connection. Majorly in a rationalist approach. Rationalist approach, the approach based on the reasoning, the approach to study the mind as a subject was being done by philosophical or ancient philosophers like Plato, Aristotle. These geniuses were studying mind in a rationalist manner based on the reason, just based on the reasoning. But later on, when the modern philosophers came, they said that no, reason should not be our approach, but our approach should be observation. From reason to observation. Rationalist approach said that, what happens when 10 philosophers are sitting in a crowd? They will argue about anything not based on the scientific reasoning, not based on the scientific observation, facts and data. They will reason it just on their understanding of anything. Like, you see, birds of a feather flock together. This is the popular saying. Now, if a philosopher or if a group of philosophers is studying this aspect, they will reason it based on what? Arguments. They will argue with each other. One will say, no, birds of a feather don't flock together. there are opposites to it. Other will say, no, no, this is true. They will just do dissection of this based on reasons, rational approach, rationalism they follow. But science says, or modern disciplines say, that anything should be based on observation. So modern philosophers said that if we have to study anything, we have to study it based on the observation. Based on this philosophy only, when the philosophers of modern nature started studying our mind body relationship. What relationship? Mind body relationship. They observed that there are two types of approaches within this: mind, body. One approach is your interactionism, which says that mind shapes the body and the body shapes the mind. Mind and body, they both reinforce each other. Interactionism, they interact with each other. Another approach, mind, body, dualism. These two are separate entities. Mind is a separate entity, body is another entity. And there is a communicator in between them, which is called your pineal gland. Through the pineal gland, they are communicating with each other. These two are separate entities. They don't interact directly with each other. For example, there are certain marriages in which mind, body, husband, wife, they are separate entities. They don't reinforce or interact, shape each other. What happens? They have a pineal gland. Who is this pineal gland? In-laws. Whatever communication takes place between them is through in-laws. In-laws will tell what to do. Wife, husband not interacting with each other. This is called, who is the pineal gland? In most of the cases, brother-in-law or sister-in-law or mother-in-law also. They will say how mind and body will interact, because they are separate entities. Same in the case girlfriend boyfriend approach, they are not interacting with each other, but pineal gland. Who is this pineal gland? The friends. Friends will say, this guy is not good for you, this girl is not good for you, because you don't have the judgment, you are not interacting, communicating with each other. This is called dualism approach. दोनों अलग अलग हैं, इसीलिए डुअलिज्म, दुआ करो इनके लिए, क्योंकि ये डुअलिज्म वाला अप्रोच है, दुआ, pineal gland approach. And what we saw earlier, mind body interacting, mind and body interacting with each other. Whatever mind thinks, body does. Whatever body does affects the mind. Interactionism. Happy relationship approach, husband wife interacting with each other, communicating with each other, shaping each other's behavior also. Girlfriend, boyfriend, same story. No role of friends who are suggesting what you should do, what you should not do. The champion of these streams, interactionism and dualism, two approaches. Champion is Descartes, wrote as Descartes but pronounced as Descartes. Descartes is the champion of these approaches. Interactionism given by another person, dualism given, no, that's not true. Actually, many of the sources are not valid, and there is no need to drop 10 names, as I've already suggested you. Dropping names does not give you marks. So the champion of these approaches is Descartes. Interactionism and dualism. When it was being studied by our modern philosophers who said that it should be based on the observation, they realized that due to modern science, we can now study the sensory system and nervous system. We can now study the sensory system and nervous system of the body and how it affects science. How the sensory system and nervous system, operation of the sensory and nervous system affects our perception. These are the bodily sensations, the nervous system the part of the body, sensory system the part of the body, but how it affects our perception. The champion here being Fechner. Fechner, F-E-C-H-N-E-R. Fechner. What does he say? He observed that the intensity of light and intensity of sound defined our perception of these senses. That is, if the intensity of light is too high, our perception, the way we perceived it, was equally like it was intensity of the physical stimuli, intensity and the way we perceived. The way we perceived it this was going 1 to 1. The way light's intensity changed, the same way our perception also got shaped. The way we react, our arousal system, all behaved according to the intensity of light or sound or any stimuli which came in the environment. This was given by whom? Fechner. Fechner gave this, and in the same era, the modern philosophers were saying that we should studied any discipline based on the observation. So there was a need to include not only the philosophy, which was primarily studying the elements of mind, but to include physiology also. Philosophy was studying mind, physiology was studying body. The mind-body interactionism approach said that mind and body not only interact with each other, they shape each other. And in the same era, Fechner gave this observation that the physical characteristics of the stimuli of the environment shapes our perception, which is a mental makeup. So the bodily sensations shape our mental perceptions, mental environment, and our mental environment shapes the behavior we have in the environment. Mind and body are interacting with each other. So that gave birth to an approach which was a mixture of both philosophy and physiology. And this propelled the whole group of experts to think that there can be a new discipline known as psychology, which by using the disciplines of both philosophy and physiology can study mind. Mind it, observe it, that we are still studying mind only. Mind is our subject matter. Mind, we are studying the mind. By using these two, there was a need for a new discipline, psychology. But as the forces in the society were leaning towards scientific approach, not only the observation based, but not only observation but experimental observation. Within the discipline of psychology itself. First was the birth of psychology as a mixture of philosophy and physiology, new discipline, and within the discipline of psychology there emerged the forces which said that not only observation should be their hallmark of the scientific study, the experimental observation should be the main stem of psychology. That, my dear friends, gave birth to what is known as the most defining forces of psychology, under the influence of one of the powerful personalities of psychology, Wilhelm Wundt. Also called the father of psychology by many psychologists, apart from the fact that some of them assume that Sigmund Freud was the father of psychology. Wilhelm Wundt was a powerful personality, and you know, if somebody is a powerful personality, he or she does not believe in something which is going on. This person is revolutionary, radical, bratish in the approach, and will bring something new, which will continue till eternity, or if not eternity, for a very long period. So what Wilhelm Wundt did, along with his disciple, his student Titchener, Wilhelm Wundt and Titchener, what they did, They not only established a lab in Germany, to study. The lab was established to study what? The subject matter has changed. They are saying, what are you studying? You are studying mind. Have you seen somebody's mind? Can it be observed? Can you see and observe mind? The answer is no. So they said, rather than studying this mind, we should study consciousness. What is consciousness? How we react. And according to the structuralist, this approach of Wilhelm Wundt and Titchener was called structuralism. What they are supposed to study? The structure of consciousness. The structure of consciousness the structure of the consciousness. What constitutes your consciousness? They said under the structuralism approach, see its structure, its constituents. Structure, the constituents, primarily image, affect, sensation. Structuralists under the garb of Wilhelm Wundt and Titchener says that you have to study these constituents and you have to see how they interact with each other. And what is the method of study? In controlled conditions of the lab. These are the controlled conditions of the lab. This here is our trained person, trained observer. Here stimuli is presented in form of light, sound, etc. is presented to the person. This trained observer will do what? Introspection. Now mind it, this introspection is different from how we use the word introspection. How we use the word? In one of the exams, one of the year, I got lesser marks in mains. So I went to a person who got 35 rank, one of my friend, very good friend actually, 35 rank, Orissa cadre, director education. I asked what happened, what did you use? What he told me, go and do introspection. I said, what introspection should I do? Go and sit in the room alone, take a paper, write down all these issues and reflect upon this. Complete Nonsense, non-scientific approach. That is non-scientific approach. Here what they are doing, they according to the structuralist are following a scientific approach. Scientific approach of introspection. When the stimuli is presented, light is there or a sound comes, they will see, they will observe that what images, what emotions, what sensations come to their consciousness, not mind. Mind lost, thrown away. Come to the consciousness. What kind of images comes to the consciousness? What kind of affect, that is emotion. Affect is a brief period of emotion. What sensations they encounter and how they are interacting with each other. Not very easy task, let me tell you, very complex. But they were trained by these structuralists. They were supposed to see these constituents and how they are interacting. Based on that, the structuralists said that we will understand the consciousness and this should be our study matter. The object of study should change from mind to consciousness. From mind to consciousness. Lab experiment, that's why it was scientific. The first scientific approach towards understanding psychology, for sure. Wilhelm Wundt being called father of the experimental psychology, because before that there was no experiments prevalent. There was no mentioning of any kind of experiment. Father of experimental psychology. Scientific method definitely used. But tell me honestly, the kind of definition we have for psychology now, scientific study of human behavior and cognitive process, does that fit the definition? Do you think it is the scientific approach, especially the introspection, which is quite subjective? Consciousness, again, not an observable, measurable phenomena? The answer is no. That is why if we look at the scientific rigor, according to the parameters of scientific rigor, the structuralists failed miserably. Not only failed, they failed miserably. Titchener, being the student of Wilhelm Wundt, went a bit ahead. और हमारे इधर कहावत है ना, गुरु गुड़ तो चेला चीनी. Means sometimes the students are much better than the teachers. At many places you can see this example. So what Titchener said, sir, Mr. Wundt, what you are doing? You are wounding the discipline of psychology. This method of introspection is quite subjective. So the training of the participants who are doing this introspection should be scientifically rigorous, and the constituents of consciousness should not only studied in a manner how I, A and S, image, affect and sensation, interact with each other, but the physical properties, the strength, duration, intensity of all these constituents of consciousness should also be studied, and their interaction with each other should also be made significant. So Titchener went a bit ahead of Wilhelm Wundt for sure, but largely if we say the structuralists failed as far as scientific rigor of the discipline is concerned. So what did they give to the psychology? They started the modern psychology for sure, because the psychology was being studied scientifically from now onwards, and the positives, the negatives we have already summarized. The positives, they had a huge heuristic impact. अब जब हम कहते हैं heuristic, what does it mean? देखो, they already brought this internal mechanism. They are not saying that the light. अब फेकनर ने क्या बोला था? अभी हमारा behaviorist तो आया नहीं, behaviorist will come later. What does Fechner say? What did Fechner say? Fechner said that the stimuli and our perception, they go hand in hand, right or not? This is what they are saying. Physiological approach. Later on, radical behaviorists will also say the same. But what structuralists are saying, that no, there is no one-to-one connection between stimulus and response, stimulus and behavior, but there is something which is called internal mechanism. So rather than simple SR approach, there is something called SIR approach. I is internal mechanism, not SOR I am using because of some reasons which we will explain later. This SIR approach, internal mechanism, this internal mechanism can be of the cognitivist way or the psychoanalytic way, cognitivist or psychoanalytic. So structuralists actually laid the foundation for two major forces on psychology. One is your psychoanalytic perspective, because of two reasons now. One is the internal mechanism was brought as told by psychoanalytic perspective also, that there is psychic determinism, our internal mechanism, innate tendencies to show our psychic forces of sex and aggression, to display sex and aggression in our environment, which is shaped by early childhood experiences, determines our personality, determines our behavior, told by psychoanalytic perspective. Likewise, cognitive perspective says that there is a filter between S and R this is stimulus, this is response. There is a filter through which the stimulus goes, then only the response is shaped. Even if you are hungry and you are writing your main examination, you are very hungry, but you have to complete the paper because you know completing the paper is very important. It will shape my career, it will shape my whole life. Will you still like to leave the room with the permission of the invigilator and go outside and have a sandwich? Or many students nowadays I see they will carry the Red Bull along with their water bottle as well. So one Red Bull in between. No, no Red Bull. The bull is in front of you. If you don't complete the paper, you will be bullied for the whole life. You will be bullied for the whole year, if not the whole life. So cognitive approach, there is something, some filter inside you, despite the fact that you are hungry, that you are focusing on the paper and you give outstanding performance despite the fact that you are hungry. As I gave you the example of Elon Musk, despite the fact that limiting environment was there, this person excelled like anything. So cognitive approach, cognitive and psychoanalytic perspective both were shaped, the foundations were laid in the structuralist approach itself. You see, the psychoanalytic approach, not only the psychic determinism, you see, what are they studying? Structure of the unconscious. Here what is being studied? Structure of the conscious. You see, the structuralist, this is structuralist. This is your psychoanalytic approach. They are studying structure of conscious or consciousness. They are studying the structure of unconscious. Both are having structural approach or not? Yes, that's also a heuristic approach, heuristic impact of structuralism. Internal mechanism. Well, this is heuristic impact. Second is because of the huge opposition or as a reverse force or as an opposing force, what emerged? Both functionalism, which we'll study after this, and behaviorism were founded as opposing principle to structuralism. As structuralism said, you should study consciousness. Consciousness, the structure of consciousness, which is image, affect, sensation, and how do they interact with each other through the method of introspection done by trained observers in a lab condition, controlled lab condition, where in the controlled lab condition stimuli is presented and the consciousness and its structure is studied so as to make sense of the consciousness, and that should be the focus of study of psychology. Psychology should study consciousness. But what functionalists said? That no, studying the structure of something is not going to help us. We should study whether it is functional or not, functionality of the consciousness itself. The second force which shaped the principle of psychology after structuralists dominated for a long period. They had huge impact, and as I told you, Wilhelm Wundt was not a weak person. Weak people don't define history, so never be weak. You should be weak only if you have to save the very important relationships. Apart from that, you should always showcase your strength. And strong people shape the discipline, strong people shape the history. Never take it on your self-esteem. So Wilhelm Wundt has a huge impact on the discipline of the psychology, being called the father of psychology. But after that came another force known as functionalism. Functionalists were defined by what? They were defined, and in fact they were inspired by, this was the time of Darwin, Charles Darwin, the principle of survival of the fittest. So they were defined by the fact that we should study consciousness only, from mind to conscious or consciousness. But within consciousness, what we should study, not its structure. See how it changed from mind, which the early psychologists and philosophers, actually, that the birth of psychology had not taken place in its experimental way. The birth of psychology took place when it was being studied in the lab condition experimentally, scientifically by Wilhelm Wundt, being the father of psychology. So there was study of mind. From mind, the study changed to consciousness. Within consciousness, we have structuralists who study the structure of consciousness. Within consciousness, we have functionalists who study the function of consciousness, how consciousness helps in adaptation to the changing environment. The environment is changing every second, as you know. Environment is changing. Everything changes. Many people think that they have become God, demigod. इससे पहले जो शख्स यहाँ पर तख्ते नशी था, उसको भी अपने खुदा होने का उतना ही यकीन था. Every party which comes to power thinks that we are going to rule the country for 25, 30, 50 years. And every person who, suppose somebody is teaching sociology, psychology, history, they think that I am the only teacher who is going to dominate the stream of psychology for next 50 years. But that is not true. इससे पहले जो शख्स यहाँ पे तख्ते नशी था, उसको भी अपने खुदा होने का इतना ही यकीन था. So everybody, everything changes. The environment is changing like anything. How does consciousness help us in adapting to this changing environment should be the focus of our study. These functionalists were inspired by theory of evolution. Survival of the fittest. How do we evolve? Functionalists. Functionalism. What is the function of consciousness? This is the focus of study. Functionalists had a huge impact on the discipline of psychology again, because they shaped educational psychology stream very, very significantly. This perspective you can see in terms of an approach known as Vygotsky's approach. What does Vygotsky say? Let's say this is your innate ability, but if you are helped by your environment, by your teacher, peer group, then you can develop your innate abilities can be developed to this level. This is ZPD, zone of proximal development. ZPD is zone of proximal development. Through the help of environment, how you are adapting to it. अब यहाँ पे देखो, if you want to apply it, कहीं से भी connect कर सकते हैं. इसको बोलते हैं मास्टरी. मास्टरी इज नॉट रीडिंग 10 बुक्स. आपने ये पढ़ा पियाजे में. पियाजे ने क्या बोला? एसिमिलेशन, accommodation. You have an understanding or a concept in your mind. You see cat and tiger as a child as the same family. Okay. Now, this is your conceptual understanding. But your teacher tells you, or through the book you realize that these two belong to the same family, but there is huge difference between the behavior of a cat and a tiger. You cannot tame a tiger, or you can tame a tiger but you can never tame a lion. So ये difference, this is a new information. How do you accommodate this thing? First is your assimilation. Through assimilation you form a concept. Assimilation leads to formation of a concept. This is your concept. Okay, the tiger, cat, all are equal. After the concept you encounter new information. New information is encountered by you. Then you do accommodation. That gives birth to new concept. Or a better concept. From old concept which you received through assimilation, encountering information from the environment, leading to new concept. This process is called accommodation. This process also came out of which approach? Functionalism. What is the function of your consciousness? Although the study matter changed from consciousness, it became behavior. Mind to consciousness, conscious, structuralist, functionalist. Functionalist saying that how we adapt to our environment, that should be our focus of study. But you see, where was the lack? Although it also had huge heuristic impact, that gave birth, functionalism gave birth to, later on, functionalism gave birth to behaviorism, which was a major force which shaped psychology for many years and still relevant. But again, the problem with the functionalism was that the matter of study, consciousness. Consciousness is not measurable, observable in an objective manner. So measurability and observability, measurable, observable in objective manner. It is not measurable, not observable in objective manner. That's why the discipline of psychology thought that we should change our study matter itself, the subject matter itself. So from consciousness, mind, it became behavior. And when we say behavior, it is overt behavior. Overt, which is apparent in the environment, overt, and which we can observe through our eyes, observe and measure. Anything other than that became redundant. Behaviorists said that why are we studying something which we cannot observe? Consciousness, mind, we cannot observe. What nonsense is going on? Let's study something which we can measure, which we can observe. And they said what all we are saying, our basic fundamentals of learning psychology itself is faulty. They said everything is defined by environment. Stimuli in the environment defines everything. According to the stimuli, there will be response. The behavior which is shown by the person or an animal, their major studies, the behaviorists' major study were done on animals. Their perception was that stimuli in the environment defines our behavior completely. They said that covert processes, internal mechanism, that does not make any sense, that is not objective, that we cannot see, that we cannot observe, that we cannot measure, and that's why we should not study them. From there came our SR approach or radical behaviorism. Environmental determinism. Or neuropsychological approach. What does behaviorism say? How behaviorism defined psychology for many years, and how the forces which opposed behaviorism, like cognitive approach, humanistic approach, and the champion of psychoanalytic approach, Sigmund Freud, how these sources and forces were shaping the discipline of psychology, we will see in the next class. In the next class, we will also see how psychology as a discipline is different from other disciplines of science and social science, humanistic disciplines. How psychology is different from other humanistic disciplines, how psychology is different from other natural sciences disciplines. Then we will see the application of psychology to societal problems. We will also see the recent trends in psychology. Once the foundation stone of psychology has been put up, which will be done till Friday when there is our next class, we will move swiftly to other chapters. So with this, we will end our class here only. don't waste your time in noting the facts, just understand the things. It is very important for you to realize that 3-4 points you can write in the examination that you should understand, explain, and you should revise it again and again, so that you get very good marks. No need to overstress yourself. See you in the next class on Friday, and I hope your interest in psychology is also increasing day by day. Apart from the fact that you are preparing for a competitive examination, you should do it with a full vigor and zeal. There is no point doing anything like a dead wood. Thank you very much. Good night.